Charles II of Spain is the most famous face of a genetic disaster. A king so inbred, he literally couldn't chew his own food. But there is a much darker, hidden chapter to this tragedy. The Habsburg nuns. First, we'll explain the dark reason behind their existence. Then we'll expose every holy rule they broke. Secrets so explosive, they would have triggered a massive rebellion. She built a secret palace to hide from her family's unthinkable plans. Princess Joanna of Austria believed she had finally beaten the Habsburg curse, until the very walls meant to protect her became the site of her greatest nightmare. She was the daughter of the most powerful man in Europe, Charles V of Spain, and his double first cousin, Isabella of Portugal. Joanna of Austria is a forgotten victim of Habsburg inbreeding who had to endure things you'd never want to experience yourself. As you likely already know, the Habsburgs married close relatives to keep wealth and power within the family. Joanna herself married her double first cousin, João Manuel, Prince of Portugal. But that was only the first part of the plan. The second was producing a male heir together. The couple did not have to wait long. A year later, Joanna became pregnant. Normally, the birth of a royal son in the 16th century would have been wildly celebrated. But in this case, a tragedy that struck just days before the birth of Sebastian, the future king of Portugal, left everyone speechless. To protect Joanna from this shocking news, her family hid it from her for around 3 weeks. Sebastian's father never met him. The king's father died on January 2nd, 1554, at the age of only 16. The reason for this was a disease that people back then called consumption. Today, tuberculosis. Joanna was devastated. Many royal women in her position, after the death of their husbands, became nuns. But Joanna never did, because in 1554, only a few months after giving birth, her father, Emperor Charles V, made a decision that would lead to yet another heartbreak. He recalled her to Spain to serve as regent, ruling in the absence of her brother, Philip II. Because Sebastian was the sole heir to the Portuguese throne, the Portuguese court refused to let him leave the country. Joanna had to leave her infant son behind. She never saw him again in person, relying entirely on letters and portraits to watch him grow up. But the cruel plans of Joanna's family did not end there. They had something in store that would push her to the limits, leading her to build a safe place that they would later overtake and use for their own sinister deeds. Joanna was trapped. Her brother, Philip, was pressuring her to do something that disgusted her. When King Philip II returned to Spain in 1559, following his failed marriage to Mary Tudor of England, Joanna's time as regent was over. She was still a young, wealthy, and incredibly powerful widow. Philip saw his female relatives, including Joanna, as important tools for building political alliances. He heavily involved her in his grand international marriage negotiations, hoping that a second marriage could secure new alliances for Spain. But he wanted her to marry someone completely inappropriate. At first, Philip was aiming high, unbelievably high, when trying to find Joanna a second husband. Because she was a former regent of Spain and a Habsburg princess, he considered only men at the very top of the European power pyramid. Marrying Joanna to King Charles IX of France, who was 15 years younger than her, was Philip's greatest ambition, but the plan did not work out. So Philip and his advisors seriously considered marrying Joanna to Don Carlos, the Prince of Asturias. Don Carlos was Philip's son, which meant he was also Joanna's much younger nephew. The widow had had enough of her brother's disturbing plans, so she used a loophole: religion. In 1557, she bought the old palace in Madrid where she had been born, and then converted it into a convent for Franciscan nuns. It became known as the monastery of the Royal Barefoot Sisters. While Joanna herself did not become a nun, she claimed to have taken private vows of perpetual chastity and devotion to God, meaning that she could not marry again. The place she founded may have seemed innocent at first, but in the decades that followed, it would become a dark and far from holy institution. There, the Habsburg nuns would hold secrets that, if revealed to the public, could provoke a massive rebellion. Joanna of Austria's life ended quickly, but the institution she created survived and served several dark purposes. You can find a shocking medieval story about a nun who was caught breaking the most sacred rule on our Patreon. By subscribing, you'll also get exclusive videos, dark history facts, an ad-free experience, and more. Link in the description. Although Joanna lived a highly autonomous and powerful life behind the scenes, her health deteriorated rapidly in her late 30s. She died on September 7, 1573, at only 38 years old. Her official cause of death was cancer. In a beautiful, full-circle twist of fate, Joanna was buried exactly where her life began. She was laid to rest inside her beloved monastery in Madrid. Her funeral chapel and tomb were intentionally built on the exact spot where she had been born. For the next 2 centuries, the convent Joanna built continued to function as she intended, but with one exception. To understand the building's true purpose, we need to look at the story of Sister Margarita de la Cruz. Margarita was the daughter of Joanna's sister, who had married her first cousin, Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian II. Together, they had 16 children, but King Philip II was about to become a problem once again. Following her father's death, Margarita traveled to Madrid with her widowed mother. Shortly after their arrival, King Philip II of Spain lost his 4th wife, who happened to be Margarita's older sister, Anna. Desperate for an heir and determined to keep the crown strictly within the Habsburg lineage, Philip II set his sights on Margarita, who was 40 years younger than him. To the absolute shock of the king and the entire Spanish court, she refused the proposal and chose instead to become a nun at the monastery of the Royal Barefoot Sisters. This was one reason Habsburg princesses ended up in convents. It allowed them to escape the dark reality of marrying close relatives and producing heirs. But there was another reason as well. When the Habsburgs had too many daughters, they feared that marrying them off would distribute family wealth outside the dynasty. As a result, they placed these women in the monastery. Yet if necessary, the Habsburgs could use their influence with the Pope to release them from their vows, allowing them to resume their roles as princesses, marry, and bear children for the dynasty. But do not mistake what Joanna built for an ordinary convent. Behind its palace walls, it broke nearly every holy rule that governed the lives of ordinary nuns. Some of the Habsburg nuns residing at Las Descalzas Reales were extraordinarily inbred. They suffered from several well-documented health issues that were not only physical. 16th century methods of treating them only made everything more unsettling. Because the nuns carried the same recessive genes as their royal brothers, many of them suffered from the famous Habsburg jaw, an extreme underbite paired with a severely recessed upper jaw. It was not just an aesthetic issue. Contemporary accounts suggest their teeth did not align, making it incredibly difficult to chew food. This led to chronic indigestion and choking hazards. Several nuns also had enlarged tongues, causing them to drool constantly and struggle with speech. They also experienced issues we hear a lot about today. Given the claustrophobic environment, the pressure of religious perfection, lack of sunlight, and genetic predispositions that ran rampant in the Habsburg line, many sisters suffered from what was then called melancholy. Essentially severe depression, anxiety, and even hallucinations of things that were not there. In the 16th century, the medical understanding of mental health was non-existent, leading many to incorrectly attribute these conditions to demonic possession. Early modern convent medicine did not rely on doctors who were forbidden from entering the strict enclosure. Instead, nuns turned to their collections of holy relics, including pieces of the true cross on which Jesus was believed to have died, bones of saints, and holy thorns. A specific relic would be brought from the reliquary and pressed directly onto the painful body part. In addition to exorcisms, sometimes performed by priests, the nuns had their own version of this practice, one that could only be performed at night. In the 16th and 17th centuries, the middle of the night was not simply a time to sleep. It was seen as a highly dangerous spiritual zone. Medieval and early modern Christians believed that the hours between midnight and dawn belonged to dark spirits. While the rest of the world slept, temptation, witchcraft, and demonic oppression were believed to be at their strongest. They thought that unless someone prayed while the rest of the world slept, the devil could easily corrupt the souls of Madrid's sleeping citizens. Therefore, nuns would wake in the middle of the night, walk through the monastery's cold corridors, and sing religious prayers, believing they were keeping evil spirits away. Because of this, you might think that Joanna's convent was the holiest place on earth. In reality, it was far from it. The nuns living there held secrets that would have resulted in a massive scandal if they had ever come to light. The Habsburg nuns were not really who they claimed to be. They created a perfect illusion for the peasants, lying through their teeth about something that was fundamental to ordinary nuns. This lie is evident in the name of the place itself, the monastery of the Royal Barefoot Sisters. For a typical nun throughout European history, poverty was not seen as a punishment, but as a privilege. According to this belief, Jesus was born poor and died stripped of everything. Therefore, to achieve true spiritual perfection and become a bride of Christ, a nun had to free herself of all worldly attachments. When taking her final vows, a nun swore to the three evangelical counsels: chastity, obedience, and poverty. An ordinary nun owned absolutely nothing. Her clothes, prayer book, wooden spoon, and bedding were all property of the community. If a nun referred to her robe as "my robe," rather than "our robe," she could be punished for the sin of pride and personal ownership. When she died, she was buried in a simple shroud in a communal plot, leaving nothing behind. When Princess Joanna of Austria founded Las Descalzas Reales in 1559, she specifically wanted the most spiritually elite nuns to populate it. In medieval and early modern minds, wearing fine leather shoes and boots was a powerful indicator of wealth and high social status. Being barefoot showed the opposite. It was linked to beggars and poor peasants. But the nuns of the monastery did not respect these rules. They merely performed poverty and humility in public. In reality, the convent where Joanna's sister, Empress Maria of Austria, later retired, was the richest in Christendom. It operated on a level of wealth comparable to that of a modern, multi-billion-dollar, ultra-luxury private museum. Noble women and princesses simply could not resist bringing their riches, fine art collections, and diamond jewelry with them. But extreme wealth was only the beginning of the bizarre things that went on behind closed doors. Historical records make it clear that the Habsburg nuns drank something every day in amounts that would really surprise us today. For them, however, it was the most normal thing in the world. The reason was actually logical. In early modern Europe, an adult typically consumed anywhere from 1 to 2 liters of it per day. And no, it was not water. There is a famous historical myth that people in the past did not drink water because it would instantly poison them. That is actually a bit of an exaggeration. People throughout European history did drink water, and they knew the difference between good and bad water. The problem was not that they avoided water entirely. Rather, as European populations grew, finding clean water became incredibly difficult. They also lacked the scientific understanding of germ theory. Ironically, the quality of water in Europe peaked more than 1,000 years before the Royal Barefoot Sisters were even founded. The Romans were utterly obsessed with water infrastructure. They recognized that stagnant, murky water caused disease, so they built huge aqueducts to carry clean water from springs and mountains into cities. When the Western Roman Empire collapsed, the knowledge and funding required to maintain these massive aqueducts vanished. Most of them fell into ruin, or became blocked. However, peasants living near mountain streams or deep, protected underground wells often had access to perfectly fine water, which they drank regularly. As medieval cities grew more crowded, the disaster began. Humans lived in close proximity to their own waste. It was often dumped into rivers, and when it was not, rain washed trash into local waterways that were simultaneously used for drinking and bathing. By the time the Descalzas Reales was built in Madrid, Europe was urbanizing rapidly, and city water was at its absolute worst. Early modern water was a major source of disease. Because of this, people had to choose an alternative to water. They chose wine and beer, including the Habsburg nuns. But you might wonder, how was it not dangerous to drink so many liters of wine? Here was the trick. They took water, mixed it with wine, and boiled it. The heat killed bacteria, viruses, and parasites in the water, but the most unholy thing about the entire organization was who their servants were. They were not ordinary people. This is perhaps the single most striking and hypocritical paradox of the entire institution, one that would be considered a massive sin by modern standards. Under the original rule of St. Clare, written in 1253, nuns were expected to perform manual labor themselves. St. Clare fiercely believed in holy poverty, meaning that the sisters should sweep, cook, wash, and weed their own gardens to remain humble and avoid the sins of pride and laziness. If you walked into a wealthy Spanish convent in the 1600s, you would immediately see two types of women wearing different habits. At a super-elite royal monastery, such as the Descalzas Reales, however, the luxury went even further, and the reality was even darker. The choir nuns were Habsburg princesses, duchesses, and daughters of wealthy merchants. They wore black veils. Because their families paid a massive cash dowry to secure their admission to the convent, they were considered the elite. Their role was to pray for the souls of the king, the empire, and their families. They spent hours each day singing the divine office, reading scripture, or doing delicate embroidery. The elite nuns did not sleep in rows of tiny, identical stone cells. Instead, they lived in multi-room apartments funded by their families, featuring small kitchens and servants' quarters. The lay sisters were women from lower class or peasant backgrounds who wore white veils. They were often admitted to the convent without paying a dowry, but on one condition: they had to do the chores. They cooked the large communal meals, baked the bread, washed the heavy habits, and tended the fires. But at the Habsburg monastery, the choir nuns did not rely solely on the poorer lay sisters. When a Habsburg princess was forced into the cloister, she did not leave her royal lifestyle entirely behind. The convent allowed these elite women to bring personal servants and enslaved women with them. That is the greatest irony and hypocrisy of the entire institution. Yet probably the darkest story within the palace walls took place in 1573. The woman who caused so much trouble was not actually a nun at Descalzas Reales, although she frequently visited the convent, and her story ultimately ended in prison. Ana de Mendoza y de la Cerda, universally known as the one-eyed Princess of Eboli, was one of the most headstrong figures of the Spanish Golden Age. Her life was closely intertwined with the Descalzas Reales through two prominent women of the era: her close friend and protector, Joanna of Austria, who founded the famous convent of Las Descalzas Reales in Madrid, and her fierce ideological rival, Saint Teresa of Avila. Legend says Anna lost her right eye in a fencing match with a male servant when she was a teenager. Modern historians, however, suggest that she may simply have had a severe squint or lazy eye, which she cleverly concealed with custom eye patches that matched her lavish court gowns. But this wasn't the most bizarre thing about her. Ana was born into the House of Mendoza, one of Spain's richest and most powerful aristocratic families. She married Ruy Gómez de Silva, King Philip II's chief advisor and closest confidant. This union placed her at the very center of royal power. When Rui died in 1573, a distraught Anna decided on a whim to become a nun. However, she did not enter the Descalzas Reales in Madrid. Instead, she forced her way into the Carmelite convent in Pastrana, which she had helped fund. She brought her entire royal entourage, including maids and luxury furniture, completely disrupting the nuns' vow of poverty and throwing tantrums when challenged. This caused such an explosive clash with Saint Teresa that the nuns eventually sneaked out in the middle of the night and abandoned the convent entirely. The life of the Princess of Eboli ended in a deeply tragic and dramatic fall from grace. The tipping point came in 1578 when a royal secretary named Juan de Escobedo discovered that Ana and Antonio Perez were running shadow operations and leaking secrets. Fearing exposure, Perez convinced King Philip II that Escobedo was a traitor who needed to be quietly eliminated. Philip approved the plot, and Escobedo was assassinated in the streets of Madrid. However, the truth quickly unraveled. When King Philip realized that his own secretary had manipulated him into authorizing a political murder, his fury was absolute. He felt deeply betrayed by both Perez and Ana. On the night of July 28, 1579, King Philip ordered the simultaneous arrest of Antonio Perez and the Princess of Eboli. Perez eventually made a dramatic escape, but Ana was not so fortunate. Because of her high noble status, she could not be thrown into a common dungeon, so Philip placed her under strict house arrest. Her punishment grew increasingly cruel over the years. She was allowed to stand by a single dark window for only 1 hour each day to catch a glimpse of the town square. Sick, isolated, and broken in health, but refusing to beg the king for a humiliating pardon, Ana de Mendoza died in that walled-off room on February 2, 1592, at the age of 51. But Ana was not the only tragic woman in European history. In Tudor England, Henry VIII had an inbred wife whose fate ended in an even more chilling way. Click to discover her story.